Hi, welcome to another edition of In the Clubhouse. I'm your host, Bob Busser. When I was a kid growing up in the 60s, I listened to Boss Radio KHJ in LA with a real Don Steele, Robert W. Morgan, the Supreme Beamer, B. Mitch Reed, and all these guys. They brought music to life to me. But as a kid, I was 7 or 8 years old. I thought like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or the Hollies showed up and just played in the studio with little did I know they had records. So we're going to talk today to a Jersey boy, Glenn Kootz Taylor, who is a producer and has his own band called the Kootz. So with that, let's welcome Glenn Taylor. Welcome,
Great,
buddy.
great to be here in the clubhouse.
Good to have you, man. We've talked for so long and chatted on the phone. It's nice to see you face to face, so to speak. And yes, I am coming to Jersey. Um, Glenn, tell us a little bit about the Kootz Band.
Well, the Kootz Band started like a bunch of dads with young kids that got together like once a month to jam in the basement back in about 1995, 96, when our kids were like 1 and 2 years old. And and then a few people, we played like one gig a year at a local street fair here in northern New Jersey. And a couple of people heard us and said, "Yeah, you guys are pretty good. You should try to get some gigs." And the problem is, once I start trying to book a band, I'm pretty good at it. So most of the guys who were just hobbyists were trying to keep up, um, getting so many shows over a period of years that we came up with this concept of having a rotation. So we were, there's like two or three bass players, and over time, it got to be our calling card. We were known for the kind of a corporate approach to rock and roll. The Coots basically. Now we're 21 years down the road from our inception as hobbyists. We're playing almost 300 shows a year and keeping our day jobs. and, but it's really got to be tightly organized because there's travel involved. Actually, as we speak, we're preparing for a 4-day soiree down to the New Jersey shore in Bruce Springsteen country. And I'm fortunate enough to have a place down there, so we book 3 or 4 dates in a row, stay at the house, and then come back up north. But out of necessity, it became a rotation in which people like the variety, because one of the prerequisites of joining this band is you have to be able to sing. And when you have different singers, they know different songs. We're pretty much all thinking originally once or twice, but we'll stylize certain songs to our own way of playing. And with everybody singing, we get all the harmonies. We get, people might look at a great guitar solo or a great keyboard solo or a sax solo and say, "I think that was good." So yeah, man, I like it. But when you have vocals, either they are great or they're terrible. And I'm blessed to have like an army of people that really sing. They hear the harmonies, and when those when those harmonies resonate with a listener, even if they're musically uneducated, they take that home with them, and it bodes well for the band because it kind of reeks of professionalism. We try to play some deep cuts. We go, a little to the left and the right. There's always some guy that's going to say "Sweet Home Alabama," "Brown Eyed Girl," and we'll do those. The classic rock catalog even goes into, we'll do adaptations of like "Summertime" from Porgy and Bess. We will really, really do whatever we want, and people eat it up. Fortunately for us, we've got about 25,000 loyal fans on the mailing list that get our weekly bulletin. And like I said, we're out a lot. And when you play that much, you really have to change it up. You can't just serve them the same, dish at night after night. And so and we have fans that will come out 2, 3 times a week for us. So when they come out, you got to throw them a curve. And they like it. They eat it a lot. It's great.
That's awesome. I mean, you're obviously a multi instrumentalist. What instruments do you play?
Boots, I play guitar, lead and rhythm guitar, and keyboards, and I sing quite a bit. We usually have a second guitarist who, in some cases, will just be a strummer. But if they're a great singer, then all the lead guitar work will fall on me. One of my other cohorts is a real shredder, so I'll be happy to let him. I'm happy to hand my pinball crown to him, as it were. I let him. Happy to be an underpinning. I'm not a great keyboardist, but having the keyboard element in the band adds a lot of realism to some of the '60s songs, such as like the Hammond organ or Rhodes piano or clavinet. So, I know enough to make the band sound, because nobody wants to just hear guitars all night. We sometimes, if the budget allows, we have two or three great horn players, sax players, that will bring in as an add-on, sort of our own Clarence Clemens, if you will.
Uh,
And adds even a flavor, especially from Jersey. If you're doing the Springsteen or the South Side Johnny, that element of a horn in the band really adds a little realism to the performances. And so everybody carries their weight. We have a wonderful female drummer, Rhonda, who it's kind of a sight to behold, because I hate to sound chauvinistic, but there's the traditional drummer role is some guy who's a little detached from the band. She is so engaging. She's like our Karen Carpenter. She sings from behind the drums. She'll do anything from Karen Carpenter to Janis Joplin, Pat Benatar. She really rocks, and she was a real great addition because of the oddity of a non-traditional role for her in the band. And plus, again, when you're trying to keep the band small, so that there's a little more financial impetus to play. Obviously, there are less people in the band. I try to find people that, some of the guitar players will play harmonica and sing. So with everybody singing, doing one or two instruments, it really creates a wallop in a smaller package. We play as a 4-piece. People tell me you sound like an 8-piece. So it's kind of cool.
Wow. You know, keyboard players didn't come into fashion until basically John Lord with Deep Purple and his Hammond B3, which he ran through the Marshall speakers, which gave him that tone, and the rest is history. And then you had obviously Rick Wakeman and people like that, and Geddy Lee with Rush. He did keyboards on some of their albums, and the band kind of got pissed off at him, like, enough with the keys, let's just stick to what we do, But like you said, having all these musical people that play different instruments, it's like, wow, you're like a kid in a candy store.
Sure, and that's the alter ego to my real job, as it were, which is running TaylorMade Productions, which is my studio production company here in North Jersey. Run the studio out of my home in a large space that basically allows me to produce and work with other bands. I'm doing some syndicated radio, XM, and a lot of independent singer-songwriters that come in. And that's where I also get to play bass and drums on some of those tracks. So, I really am very lucky to be able to work with such talent on the live and in the studio levels. That's kind of those are my two gigs.
That is awesome. Yeah, I know you have the Sirius gig. Tell the people about your Sirius gig and Tommy James of Tommy James and the Shondells.
Tommy James is one of the longest running artists who works at TaylorMade Productions. Tommy is, I've learned more about record making from him in a sort of unscientific way. Obviously, he's an icon. He recorded Hanky Panky when he was 13 years old. That very everybody has had embossed into their pop culture memory was really him. It was a demo of him appearing on a radio show in Niles, Michigan, back in the day, and it was liked so much somebody made a recording of the live broadcast and pressed it into the record, and that's how Tommy's career got launched. But I met Tommy in about 1984. I was doing a lot of work with a gentleman named Don Ciccone. You might remember a band called the Critters from New Jersey. They had a big hit with Mr. Dyingly Sad was a big hit, and they also did a version of Younger Girl, which the Love and Spoonful later covered.
Yeah.
Was a guitarist, songwriter. He later went on to play bass in the Four Seasons in the 1970s version. Oh, What a Night, Who Loves You, Pretty Baby. The second, the second iteration of the Seasons. And Don had a jingle company. We were doing a lot of jingle work at the time. And he goes, I got somebody I want you to meet. So one day he comes over to my studio, which used to be my parents' house in the early 80s, had like about 300 square feet and no room for anything. And but always very well equipped and ready to do anything. And here I am hanging out with Tommy James, and Don had brought him over. And then again, this is the days of no cell phones, no internet, no nothing. So Don says, listen, I'm going to go out and get a cup of coffee. I'll come back to pick up Tommy. You guys can hang out and chat. Well, Don never came back that day. And Tommy was hanging out with me, and this is the day that I met him. And he says, are you booked today? I said, well, I was going to work on something of my own, but not really. He goes, you want to try to cut something? It's just him and me. And I'm like, wow. I'm standing next a little humble studio, and he wants to record. So, needless to say, that day in 1984, we got two quick demos done. He played rhythm guitar. I played everything else: drums, guitar, bass, keyboards, cut a vocal. And about 12 hours later, we finished our first sessions. In those days, you could actually cut a song in a day. And he looks at me, he goes, "How am I getting home?" I said, "Where do you live?" And at the time, he was living in Clifton, New Jersey, which is about 3 towns away from where I was. I said, "I'll give you a ride." He goes, "You want to go out to dinner?" We had a great dinner. It was one of the best professional days of my life because I got to record and hang with Tom and get paid for it, and just had a blast. And this guy has been Mr. Loyal. He's taught me so much about making records. And, we're fast forwarding now. About 2 years ago, um, Sirius XM, they have the different channels, and they've picked up different artists. Like Peter Noon has a show.
Yeah.
Um, a couple. I'm trying to think who else. I just a little Steven has a show from Springsteen's band, Steve Van Zandt. So Tommy started going into New York to Sirius XM's studios and cutting 2 shows every week, and they would, 2 shows in advance. They'd run them 2 weeks in a row. And then COVID hit in March of 2020. They shut everything down, and they're running out of shows because they can only recycle the shows for so long. And they asked, would it be possible studio out by you? Because at that point we had only recorded albums. I've done his last 10. Um, and incidentally, the last one, which is called Alive, you should check it out. It's a great, some newer stuff. We actually broke the Billboard Adult Contemporary Top 100 with it, which was a first for me, and it was just, again, another milestone with him. So Tommy calls me up. He goes, "Are you capable of doing radio?" I said, "We're recording songs with 120 tracks on them. Of course, radios stick up a mic and you talk into it." So basically, the show can be heard. We do one every other week, and the show airs on Sirius XM on the I think they used to be 60s on 6, but they changed it. It's now called, it's channel 73, 60s Gold on Sirius XM, and the show airs every Sunday nationally, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. And it's about the 60s, the music business, just a lot of deep cuts, a lot of songs you haven't heard in a while. You'll hear them, you go, "Oh gosh, I remember that. I haven't heard it in 40 years." And the education you get from listening to the show is akin to the education I've gotten from Tommy over the last like 40 years. It's a long time. And and I've been elevated to basically it's kind of a, if you're familiar with New York radio, Z100 had a show called The Morning Zoo, and it's basically
Right.
it's a current format. And he elevated me to a co-host. So the show is hosted by himself, his manager Carol Ross, who was a lot of big acts, and myself. I basically followed in the footsteps of a guy named Ed Osborne, who was a jock on CBS FM, which is huge in New York, oldie station. And of course, because Tommy had so many, he had 15 top 40 hits, CBS and is very kind to him. They play him a lot. And so Ed was a co-host, and then he decided, he had to leave. So rather than hire someone else, Tommy said, "I already have you. Why don't you become a co-host?" And here I am. So, and we also have another fellow, Dave the Rave, who's he's a rare vinyl expert. He comes in about every third week and does a guest slot on the show. So it's an incredible amount of fun. We record all the voice work here, and then Sirius programs all the music into it after they receive the mix from me. So it's a great high profile show, and it's a lot of fun to listen to. I really it's again the show is called Getting Together, which is named after his hit song Getting Together, and it's heard 5 to 8 p.m. every Sunday on the Sirius XM channel 73 Gold station. So.
I am definitely going to check it out when I'm in the car because I've got Sirius in both of our cars, and I like the older channels, because it brings you back to especially the '60s, your childhood. When you were Tommy James, or you hear the Four Seasons, or the Temptations, or the Four Tops. It just brings you back to your childhood when there was some bite and some substance to the music, which is unfortunately not that way today. I know I sound like an old man, but it's just not the same. It's all to me it seems like it's all computer generated, and where's the bass, where's the band? That's what, when I hear it.
I have a saying, and we were talking about this the other day when working in the studio with some of the newer artists, and between auto tuning vocals and obviously programming beats. Sometimes you get a genuine rock and roll band that just plugs in and plays, and you document it. But recording is no longer a documentation; it's a creation, and it's been that way for years. And I often say today there are records that I say this record could not have been made 30 years ago because you have to have the raw talent. You had to be able to perform. You had to be able to play your instruments. So in so doing, you a new style has been born. I mean, I thought the biggest drum sounds are you hear a lot of these commercials and songs. They're using a drum machine called the Roland TR-808, which basically was manufactured in the early '80s, and the sound is that little kind of hi-hat sound and the little those drum sounds they're so primitive, they're happening now. And the same thing started with the Cher song, You Believe in Love, like 30. They accidentally discovered that if they set the threshold on the autotune, you get that kind of sound. And that's still happening. And it's amazing the staying power of these, technological missteps, if you will, that people still eat them up. And one thing it's had to keep me sharp is that, I can be the old man and say, oh, they don't make records like they used to. But the fact of the matter is, if I'm going to get new clients and I'm going to continue to, you have to keep your ear to the ground. You have to stay educated. One of the bookmarks in my browser is the Billboard Top 100. And a couple of times a week, I will listen to all the new music. I'll listen to the sounds. I will buy new software and even hard synthesizers that create sounds that are current, because as soon as you start, I just happen to work with a very talented young girl, Ella Bryn, who's a local songwriter. She's 18. And the one thing I really was worried about is, let alone that I'm this old man like yourself, Bob, that she going to trust current. And fortunately, her father, Howard, who's a terrific sax player, kind of, brought her to me and said, this guy knows what he's doing. And I appreciated it. But still, I had to stay relevant. And I listened to her songs, and I kind of got it was a Taylor Swift kind of vibe. And, I kind of listened to like what those kind of songs are doing now, because the way a song that she wrote would be produced like in 1980 wouldn't sound the same. So we went, we used some of the sonics that make the song relevant, let alone that, she's a pretty good songwriter too. So it was a real pleasure, and then sometimes you get some of the old guard coming in, and they want their sounds and their production to sound like. I'm working with another guy, this guy, his name is Patty Whack, and he is like an old school swampy blues guy, and terrific guitar player, but he wants that vintage sound. So you kind of have to be able to roll between the parameters of what's current and what somebody's choices. I mean, I've recorded opera singers here, did a harpsichord album with a classical player. I mean, it's great for your musical education, because you never know what's going to come through the door. And luckily, TaylorMade Productions has a pretty cool reputation. You can check us out on Facebook, and also if they want to go to the website, I'll plug myself. It's TaylorMade Prod, TaylorMadeProd.com. See more of what the studio is about.
Can you send me my check for the plugs? That's great. I mean, people really don't, they hear songs, but they don't know how they're made. They don't know what goes into it. They think we'll talk about you as a producer now. People think, oh, you just push buttons and boom, the album comes out. But that's far from what a producer does. Can you enlighten us a little bit on what you do as a producer?
Well, again, years ago, the role was the traditional role of a producer. There were basically several people in the control room of a recording studio doing in any recording environment. There was when we were using tape, which I still occasionally do, but it's obviously fallen out of favor because it's cheaper to not buy tape and computer. But the sound of tape is always wonderful. And analog studios had one person was a tape operator, and that was the guy who would press stop, play, record, rewind, fast forward. Then you would have an engineer, and the engineer is the one who basically commits the sound to the recording, the volume levels, the brightness or the bass response of an instrument, when they're mixing, basically is told what to do by the producer, and executes it. The producer really is the brain trust of a pop record production. Let's use pop rock and roll for an example, because they're the ones who are entrusted by the record company, who is paying for the studio time in the classic sense, paying the artist. So basically entrusting the franchise, as it were, to the producer, because he makes the creative decisions that will hopefully lead to the Sonics creating a hit record. So a producer might be the person that says, okay, like a typical thing I would do as a producer. And I kind of, these days, I embody all the roles into one, because I am the computer or tape operator, I'm the engineer, and I can be the producer. Sometimes I have independent producers come in which case I'm happy to just push the buttons and do as I'm told. You politically have to be right. You can't step on people's ideas. But a producer will decide whether or not, let's say the first verse, I just want one voice. In the second verse, I want to double the voice, double tracking. And then in the chorus, I want to add harmony. Okay, now in the last verse, let's bring in a string section. And I always look at I call it the arc of the production, that most records, to keep it interesting, they have to whip themselves into some kind of audio frenzy in terms of, let's say a typical rock and roll ballad will start out with just a piano and a voice, and then the drums will come in and they'll come in with the side stick and be playing, and there'll be a nice strumming acoustic guitar, and then when the chorus comes in, the singer, you'll tell the singer, okay, when the chorus comes in, sing it a little bit harder. One of the things I'm constantly advising vocalists on is, when they're doing a ballad, or I say, do you have a lyric sheet? And they say yes, and I take it and I crumple it up and I throw it in the garbage. And the reason is, if you're reading the lyrics, I mean, you've all heard like a bad radio commercial where you can say, and you can find it in many stores. When somebody is singing from the head and the heart, they will emote differently. And I really think it's important, if someone's making a record, to have it in their head and commit it to memory, so they can just let it flow out of their heart and sing, like if it's a ballad, breathy, if it's a rock and roll, just a wail. And again, I have the tools to help them make it a better record, but I try to give them every opportunity and guidance to make the sound of the great record come from within them. And that's kind of what a producer does. It's a gentle guidance. It's like the training wheels that keep the artist upright on the musical bicycle. And it's just a great gig. It's a lot of people fancy themselves, and again, there is a lot of politics in recording, like in any business organization, where that you know more than the boss, so to speak, but the person who's paying the freight does have the last word. So as I had in a discussion with you the other day, I have a dynamic that I call the advising the artist that he's about to walk off a cliff mode, and very gently say, your guitar probably needs a little bit of tuning, rather than say, man, you're out of tune. Say, just check the tuning on your guitar. I think it might be a little flatter. And I think if you serve it up on a plate of little humility, I think that works better than you cannot assault an artist ever. You just can't. It's not done. And even sometimes you have to, if there's an idea you want them to implement, you have to sort of lead them around the side door and allow them to think that they came up with the idea. And so, you're part psychologist as well as technician and performer too. A lot of the players that come in that are songwriters, for this example, this girl Ella I was mentioning, she plays a little guitar and sings great, but that's all she does. So she needed me to basically be the band. So she played the piano and the guitar, and then I added bass, lead guitar, additional keyboards, and had her do all the background. So when I work with a songwriter, it's like that. And that's easy, because it's easier to work with a solo artist because it's a one-on-one. You have 5 guys in a band come in, you kind of have to let them sort out their differences before you even say anything. And there's some memorable arguments that I've witnessed amongst bands where people threaten to, throw an amplifier at someone. So it's, so you kind of are also part, not just psychologist, producer, engineer, tape operator, you're also peacemaker in some cases.
Yeah, I have friends that are musicians, and I've heard some of the stories, like with Boston and some of these other bands, and you just shake your head like, how come you guys didn't kill each other? I mean, I've heard the stories of people taking their bass and throwing it through a wall. Not like Pete Townsend where he was smashing his guitars or Mooney kicking over his drum kit. They were just actually pissed off, and you got to go out and kind of cooler heads prevail after a few minutes. You got to, a band is, as you've said, and people say, it's like a marriage. You got to have give and take, and but sometimes you have guys that run bands that have that iron hand. It's my way or the highway, and sometimes that doesn't work.
It doesn't, but sometimes you have to. There are certain, again, you look for people that are sensible. And I think a lot of, like, in the world of a band, now when clients come into the studio, I have no control, because if you're an open to the public entity, such as TaylorMade is, um, you do a little bit of screening like any client business relationship. It's not like a walk-up counter where they can say, I'll have a coffee and a bagel. It's there is a little bit of like, let me find out, let me learn about your project. And I genuinely want to know more about like what they're doing it, what they're planning to do with it. It's got to be released. Are they going to sell it when they play gigs? Put it on a home. Are they going to, release it to the public? And because that all boils down to the best interest of how it's done. I think that the artists these days, it's all a self-promotional world. There's no more record companies, really, if you think about it. Everybody is their own calling card. And I have found, I always even preach, my two daughters are, one is a graphic artist and one runs a glass blowing studio. And I said, you can be the best at what you do in the creative world, but the one thing that most creative people are not good at is tooting their own horn. And I said, you need to stand at the top of the mountain and scream as loud as you can. You better come see what I'm doing. And I've made a whole career of that. I mean, I started my studio when I was like 22. And I've been in bands for my whole life. And even as far back as the sixth grade, I requested a meeting with the principal of my elementary school to see if I could arrange an after school concert for my band. And don't you know, she was so enthralled with my entrepreneurial nature that she required a mandatory assembly for all the sixth grades to hear my band, which is called, I think, the Living Legends. And we did a little concert in the gymnasium after school, and I've never lost that spirit of like, if I don't speak up, no one's going to know what I'm doing. And if you follow the Kootz, you can go to Glenn Kootz Taylor on Facebook. That's Glenn, Glenn Kootz, Kootz, Taylor, Taylor, and follow the Kootz Band. We also have a website, which is thekootz.com. You'll see that I cover, there's pages of the Kootz when they were kids. There's a scrapbook of photos from gigs that we've played. There are bios on every member, and the notoriety that they may have brushed up against on their way to, working with me. And so sometimes there's a little bit of the iron fist that has to come in line, because you can't have people showing up at gigs an hour and a half late, and some have done that. So I always phrase it as far as when one person is running the show, because a democracy is great. I have a friend who has a band of his own that it's five good friends that grew up. They had the band since they were like 13. And one guy was the advertising guy. One guy was the guy who fixed the gear. The other guy got the gigs. That's great if you can do it. But I find it's easier for marketing and for what I'm trying to do. I say, all you guys have to do is know the material, show up, play, and get paid. And if we're playing on the road down the shore, like I said, you can even stay at my house, so you're not spending your money on a hotel room. So I try to give them every opportunity to make it kind of an easy peasy experience. But I think you have to, I mean, I probably spend more time, if you made a pie chart of the actual performance, I'd say for the amount of work that is put into the Kootz Band, maybe 8 or 9% of that pie slice is performing on stage. The other, 89, 90, 91% is promotion and writing the newsletter. Every week I spend 3 hours writing the newsletter before it goes out to the 25,000 subscribers. And then you hope that by sending it out to 25,000 subscribers, that maybe 25 will show up. It's that much of a trickle down. And but the good news is that as we kind of emerge from the cloistered environment of the pandemic, which is still something that we have to be mindful of, people are coming out more. In the summertime as we approach, we're going to have more outdoor shows, which is great, and that provides a feeling of more safety. And we do a lot of in the summertime. Usually in the winter, it's just the bars and the clubs. We do an occasional acoustic coffee house type of show, which is a lot of fun because it's more of a down dynamic. But in the summertime, a lot of the municipalities in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, have concert series like in the gazebos and the parks. And we're doing about 30, 40 of them this year. And you're seen by an audience that may not want to go to a bar. And what I love about those shows is you go into a restaurant, as a sports guy, you'll appreciate this. They'll have a million TVs on, and there'll be some people listening to the music, and you'll play like this quiet intro, and then all of a sudden you hear, "Wow! Did you like that intro that much?" And then I realized somebody just knocked a home run, and all the people are reacting, or somebody scored a goal, so they're reacting to they're living their life with the TV. And so what I love about we have a show coming up in about 2 weeks at a place called the Old Stone Coffee House. It's a converted church, and there's no TVs, there's no steak dinners, there's no nothing but people coming and listening in rapt attention to the band, and hanging on like every word. And that's why we do it. The summer concerts in the park thing. There's a lot of kids running around, of course, and pre-babysitting the parents and all that. But it's the essence of a summer night performing rock and roll as the sun's going down is, again, as a friend of mine once said, you have to kill the cow to get to the filet mignon. And that's the essence of playing. There are moments when you say, yes, it's so worthwhile. All the crap that we have to, weed whack our way through to get to this stage and play and see the faces, the reactions. It's really worth it to me.
That's I've been, like I've told the audience before, I've been a music fan since I was a little kid, and the thing that really, when you're a kid, you kind of listen to the pop sounds, and like the Four Seasons, things like that. And I bought Led Zeppelin for, God, 72? I was probably 14 years old, and I dropped the needle on When the Levee Breaks, and it was OMFG. What is this? It changed my whole look on music, and I dug deeper, later on in life, and found out how Jimmy Page did it, where he had Bonzo at the bottom of the stairs at Headley Grange, and they mic'd him from above to get that boom, big, deep sound. And learning all this stuff about how bands make songs has been like a passion of mine, and all the crap they've got to go through, like the Eagles, that was a soap opera made for everybody. But that, there's backstories to all that, and they're fascinating. And, I like to bring that out in people.
Well, if you like that, that's one of the very cool parts of getting to work with Tommy James on the Sirius XM show, because he's not just a DJ. He will make a left turn and go off into a story about what led up to the record being made. So if you like the backstories and those I call them left turns, the show is filled with them, and it's a great listen, because if you want to learn a little, like I didn't know that, it's very, very cool. So.
And you're also, we're going to break off the topic for a second. You're also a big Mets fan, correct?
Let's go Mets. We've been suffering long enough.
Well, you got my Red Sox in 86. I always tell people the Sox won 3-4. And, we just don't talk about game 6 or 7. It's just over. But, baseball or sports and music go together. Every lead guitarist wants to be the third baseman for the Mets or the Brewers or whoever. And every, baseball player wants to be Jimmy Page or Bonzo or Keith Moon or somebody like that.
Sure. Well, it's just like, and every musician wants to play a different, how many times I've been going to go, can I play guitar? The drummer will want to play guitar on a song. So there is a certain sense of vicarious living of, I want to do something I'm not doing. And years ago, where there were a group of Chicago White Sox that actually had a band, and they created a CD at the time. I'm trying to think of the players were that escapes me right now, but yeah, there's some very accomplished people that you can do more than one thing in life. That's what it boils down to. And people,
Absolutely. And you only have one life to live too. So, you know what? If you have talent, be it being a musician, a photographer such as I am, or an actor, or anything like that, a singer, go for it. You only have one life to live, and don't let people tell you no. If you have the passion for it, go for it. People laughed at me when I was deciding to do this ballpark history and photography, and 30 million hits later on the website. I think I've done okay. Just like you guys in music.
when I discovered, that's how we met. When I discovered your site, and I'm like, there is some other crazy guy and a million other crazy people that love stadiums and the history. Because I really thought, am I nuts to be so sentimental about my early experiences? I got to go to the Polo Grounds when the Mets were born in 1962. I went to the first time the Giants came back to visit their old home stadium. My dad, who was a huge Giants fan, took me, and the place was sold out, 50,000, a very rare Saturday doubleheader, June 2nd, 1962. Never forget it. And he, I think there's a combination for me that my father was always very encouraging about the music part, but shared the sports thing. And so there was an early melding of the worlds together that still exists to this day, and it's great. I just I love, the only time I don't love baseball or sports is when I'm playing and those people are applauding during an intro to a ballad.
Glenn, this has been a lot of fun. We're going to do this again. I appreciate all you've done and our friendship. We've known each other through Facebook and now this. He is Glenn Kootz Taylor. He's got his band in New Jersey. I highly recommend you go see them, because I know when I go back to Jersey, I'm definitely going to pop in and see you guys and stop into the studio. So thanks, Glenn, for being on, and we hope to have you back soon.
My pleasure, Bob. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Remember, everybody, always take the road to the left. You never know what you'll find. I'm Bob Busser. This is In the Clubhouse, and we will see you next time.